Hey, well, it's about 12:31, so I think I'm gonna get things started. Probably some people will come in as we're beginning, but being mindful of everyone's time, I want to get going. Just again to reiterate, if you're zooming in from New York City or somewhere around the world or around the country, please let us know. That'll help us inform the chat a little bit later because we're going to be talking about legislation at both the federal and at the state level. Also, I would say if you did not pre-register for this event from the email that we sent out, please do share your email with us because after this presentation today, we are going to be sending some important follow-up information about our day of calls coming up on Tuesday. So if we don't have your email from the pre-registration, you can either post it in the chat and we'll collect it from there, or you can email it to envirojustice@4thu.org and Barbara will put that email into the chat. And so any way you can get us your email, it's really important because we're going to be sending some follow-up information right after this presentation. Just wanted to say a few words to open up and to introduce this program. I've been reading a book by the Australian author Rebecca Giggs, and it's called Fathoms, The World in a Whale. And she said something in it about the banality of household items that belies their gruesome afterlife, which really stuck with me. And the context was she was describing a 4.5-ton sperm whale that had washed up dead on the coast of Spain in 2013. And in its stomach were found the entire contents of a greenhouse: tarps, pipes, ropes, flower pots, synthetic burlap, a spray canister. This was all in this whale's belly. And the greenhouse was from a hydroponic farm in southern Spain that grows tomatoes to export to Britain. And beyond just an entire greenhouse in this whale's stomach was parts of hangers, mattresses, an ice cream tub, etc. And to further illustrate this point, that's in the ocean. But if you were enjoying a fresh breath of air in, say, Yellowstone Park, you'd also be inhaling plastics because there are, according to a recent study, 1,100 tons of microplastics currently floating above the Western US. These are particles smaller than 5 millimeters that have come from microfibers in plastic bags and bottles we consume that are never broken down, and also from synthetic materials in our clothing released when we wash them. And these microplastics end up in our water supply, in our soil, and eventually they make their way into the atmosphere and the air that we breathe. So again, it's the banality of the simple act of washing our clothes leads to this environmental scourge. And one other interesting thing I read recently was the writer Daisy Hilliard, who noted that each of us has a second body. And she said our first body is our own personal skin, and the second body is a little bit harder to define. It's our collective biological existence and all the baggage that comes along with that, the guilt, the grief, the anger. And she writes, your first body could be sitting alone in a church in the center of Marseille, but our second body is floating above a pharmaceutical plant on the outskirts of the city. It is inside a freight container in the docks, and it is also thousands of miles away on a floodplain in Bangladesh in another man's lungs. So the purpose of our talk today, I think, is to, as Hilliard writes, incorporate the second body with the first. And to do this, we will learn how to take concrete action to help correct some of the harm that we are causing. And to start, we'll ask you to do something very simple, which is to make a phone call this coming Tuesday. But first, I want to introduce our distinguished guest today, who is Brian Langloss from Oceana, which is the largest international advocacy organization focused solely on ocean conservation. And Brian has a very personal story about why he's so committed to this work, and Barbara will post his bio in the chat. But we're so grateful that Brian is able to join us today, and I'm going to turn it over to him so that he can tell us a bit about plastics pollution and what Oceana is doing.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you everybody for having me today. I was so excited when I got the invitation, not only to speak to you, but my understanding was that you're a group of people interested in taking action. And before I begin talking to you about the problem, I just like to preface by saying this is actually a really healthy time to think about some solutions that are at hand. Not only because there are some really good solutions, which we're going to talk about, but also because the legislation, as Brett said, there are some options at the state level as well as at the federal level. Not only are these really good pieces of legislation, but they are actually gaining momentum. They're at a point where a little bit of effort can really elevate them to a trajectory towards success. So I just wanted to begin with that because I am going to share my screen and it is going to rapidly get very depressing, but I don't want to lose anybody for that reason. I want you to know that we are here to ultimately talk about, again, solutions that I think that we can all be very happy about. So let me, from the beginning. So as Brett mentioned, I'm with Oceana. We're the largest international advocacy group focused solely on ocean conservation. And looking at the ocean is a really good way to kind of take the temperature of the Earth's, the entire Earth's health. And in the category of plastic pollution, the ocean is really telling us a lot. Um, and just to kind of start this, if I may just characterize this problem, I just want to make sure that I describe to you not a bunch of consumers making really evil decisions. I definitely am of the view that people want to do the right things. And I also fully understand that people are busy, people have children, people have jobs, and people have to make 1,000 decisions a day. So Oceana's focus is not on chastising consumers because that simply is not the problem. What we're going to talk about is the root of the plastic crisis, which is really, it's a production crisis. It's a problem of production. So just to, kind of characterize the crisis itself, in terms of environmental health, the plastic crisis is very disturbing. Our globe is being inundated with a material that it doesn't biodegrade, it builds up in the environment, it persists in the environment, and it threatens both human and environmental health. Plastic debris has been found washing up on the world's most remote coastlines. It's been found melting out of Arctic sea ice. I'm actually a little history note here. Last week was the 109th anniversary of the sinking of Titanic. I'm kind of a Titanic geek. And one of the first things that really upset me about plastic when I was young, I remember seeing pictures of the wreck site of Titanic, and there's plastic down there. And you tell yourself, well, in 1912, they didn't have plastic. Or you try to say, oh, those divers, they litter, don't they? There is so much plastic entering the ocean from land-based sources. It is everywhere, even 2 miles beneath the ocean, 400 miles off the coast of Greenland. So this is having a terrible impact on the health of our oceans. This picture speaks of 1,000 words. This turtle is committing a fatal error. This turtle is mistaking a plastic bag for one of its favorite food items, jellyfish. And Oceana recently released a report on plastics and their impacts on marine life in the ocean. And even one piece of plastic can prove fatal. Just to further characterize as well the scope of the plastic problem, this is a photograph of an albatross. And this was taken basically right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was taken on the uninhabited Midway Atoll. It's in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And this is a bird that travels a very long distance. The albatross lay their eggs at Midway Atoll and they raise their young there. But the parents will cover massive distances over the ocean to basically look for food. And what they're bringing back to this Midway Atoll from all across the Pacific Ocean is killing their chicks, as we see here. These albatross parents, not knowing that this is a piece of plastic. They're feeding their chicks plastics, and much like the whale that Brett described earlier, these animals ingest plastic, and even though they feel like they're full, they are not receiving the nutrition they need. And also plastic can cause a lot of damage internally. And so that again, even one piece of plastic can result in mortality. So the albatross birds, they're not litter bugs. There are nobody in the Pacific Ocean is littering. The plastic is entering our ocean from land-based sources, and this is a production problem. Companies are producing more than 400 million tons of plastic every year. And this is just quite simply not sustainable. It's like turning on a water hose of plastic and aiming it at planet Earth and just expecting it to somehow miraculously not be a problem. If I may just show you this one slide, let me see if I can get the video going. This one category of plastic products in particular, plastic bottles, 480 billion of these bottles were sold in 2018 alone. And that is almost 1 million every minute. This is what this looks like. And in 1 minute, it'll take us to view this. We are not, this poor garbage truck here is just quite simply not going to be able to keep up with the plastic bottles that are being produced. And this doesn't run a whole minute, but what I just wanted to show here is, waste management, that's very infrastructure heavy. So a garbage truck, we think, it's a big garbage truck, it's going to take it away. It is simply not adequate to the vast quantity of plastic entering our environment. And in this case, we're just talking about just one category of plastic. Plastic production is expected to quadruple in the coming years. We're talking about how sad it is to find plastic on our beaches now, and how sad it is to read about whales and birds that are dying because of too much plastic in the ocean. Where we are today is going to look like the good old days compared to where we could be by 2050. The time to act is now. We really can still enjoy a clean and healthy environment by reasonable standards if we take action now. If we continue to let the plastic production crisis just run out of control, that's not something that we're going to be able to manage very easily in the future. So the longer we let plastic production go unchecked, the harder this problem will be for us to deal with. One of the options for dealing with plastic is, again, to just kind of review the categories of plastic, because we're ultimately talking about a design flaw here. In a beach cleanup, most commonly, the items that are found are single-use plastics. And what's so kind of offensive about that is that these items, like a single-use fork, a straw, a grocery bag, a plastic bag, these are meant to be used once, but they're designed using a material that has been engineered to last a very, very long time. It's going to persist in our environment for a very long time, again, even though it's used just once. Recycling is not a solution. Sometimes my loved ones don't want to hear me say this because they're very committed to protecting the environment, and they're very proud of the amount of time and energy they put into sorting their recycling. But even with really dedicated consumers who are prepared to take the time to sort their recycling, and even with municipal taxpayers shelling out exorbitant amounts of public money to pay basically to recover, the costs from these companies doing business, to pay for their external costs. And when you really do have the infrastructure in place, there just simply isn't the market. Virgin plastic will always be cheaper than plastic that has been sorted, collected, washed, and repurposed. And also, I want to let you know that the word recycle, it's a bit of a misnomer. Today's plastic bottle cannot be recycled in tomorrow's plastic bottle. Every time you put it through the slot machine, it basically comes out a lower grade product. So today's plastic bottle is only going to be appropriate for a lower quality product tomorrow. Let's say a plastic bag. Today's plastic bag is worthless for tomorrow's product. There's really, it just becomes less and less of a viable consumer product. So downcycling is really a better way to describe what we commonly think of as recycling. And again, we can't recycle our way out of this mess. It just simply is not going to keep up the pace. There's an analogy that is very popular right now that's going around. I really like it because I think it's very true. Let's say that your bathroom is your bathtub is overflowing, and your bathroom is flooding. What are you going to do? Are you going to run for a mop and just try to keep mopping up the floor as the water spills over from the bathtub? Or are you going to turn the faucet off? Recycling is a mop. We absolutely must focus on those policies that turn the faucet off. So those are in a nutshell, the types of campaigns that Oceana engages in to, again, that we view as being the turn the faucet off campaigns. Number one, policies to reduce plastic use. And we're going to talk about a couple of those options at the local and federal level. And another thing that we're working on, and again, I'm really eager to hear from all of you, plastic-free zones. We have some schools and other institutions across the United States. Skidmore College, for example, they just passed a resolution to become a plastic-free zone. And we are trying to get companies to offer plastic-free choices to consumers. So this is essentially, I think this is a good place for me to land our conversation for now, because I would love to talk mainly about this first option, which again, policies to reduce plastic use. And some of the opportunities coming up, number one, at the federal level is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. This is a very exciting piece of legislation. It's basically the type of legislation we have been hoping for. It would hold plastic producers responsible for the full life cycle of their product, instead of just pushing off those external costs to municipal taxpayers. There are a lot of very common sense policies that would become nationwide policies. So for example, a bottle deposit program. A bottle deposit program is already the law in 11 states. Imagine the economies of scale that would be in effect if we had a nationwide bottle deposit program coupled with extended producer responsibility requirements that would just make it impossible for plastic producers to just, again, pass off those external costs of doing business. Another provision about the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act that I'm very excited about, it's very much geared towards environmental justice. You may have heard someone say, oh, well, all that plastic in the ocean, that's from those Asian countries. And that is so very racist, because that's simply not the case. That is pointing the finger of blame to developing nations who they are being inundated with our plastic junk simply because the United States really doesn't have much of a market for recycled plastic. So a lot of that plastic that you wash and you sort and you put in the blue bin and you're trying to do the right thing, it ends up in Asia, where they have probably even less infrastructure to deal with this level of inundation of waste that we do in the United States. And it quite simply, as with most plastics, land-based plastics, they make their way into the oceans. So a ban on exporting plastics to developing nations, that's a provision of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act that I'm really excited about. And finally, and I'll end it on this one just because this one is more local, and this is where I'm really eager to get support, especially in driving phone calls to Albany. New York State has the potential to pass two really exciting pieces of legislation. One is a straws by request only bill, which it has the votes to pass. If it would just get scheduled for a vote, this would pass. Given the currents, I mean, 2021 being what it is, if there were 1,000 hours in the day, even our strongest environmental champions just simply would not be able to get to everything that needs to be gotten to today. So those phone calls to legislators in Albany, asking them to schedule the straws by request only bill for a vote, those could go so far in getting this legislation across the finish line, because the legislators in Albany, they really do want to pass it. They quite simply, they need to know from their constituents that it's a priority. The second bill that is on its way, it's actually already out of committee, unlike straws, is a ban on hotels providing personal hygiene products and single-use plastic bottles. And New York being a massive state for tourism, that could really contribute significantly to preventing plastic entering our oceans. And this too has the votes to pass. We are hoping to see that scheduled for a vote sooner than later. Both of these bills actually have wide support from the hospitality industry. Can anyone guess why? It saves businesses money. If you're not required to just throw products at people that they don't even necessarily want or need, and at times like these, any opportunity to save money is probably worth considering. So for that reason, both of these bills have very strong chance of becoming law. The legislature in Albany, their session ends in June, though. And as of right now, neither of those bills have been scheduled, and the straws bill is still in committee. So I'd be extremely grateful for any support in contacting our legislators in Albany to let them know that these bills are indeed a priority. And if you're not from New York, I do encourage you to contact your members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, to encourage them to co-sponsor the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which again is that federal legislation that we're also excited about, especially if you're in Connecticut. Senator Chris Murphy is on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and his support would be extremely valuable. And again, I think he wants to do the right thing. He just, as with all legislators, they need to know it's a priority. So with that said, I just, again, thank you so much for having me. I'll stop sharing my screen and see if I can answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Brian. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can support the New York State bill that you just spoke about. And before we turn it over to our own Brian Kramer, to talk a bit about that effort, I wanted to just ask you a couple of quick follow-ups about that. First of all, someone in the chat, Joan, asks if the paper straws or the compostable straws that we often see in some coffee shops and places, is that a solution or part of the solution, or do we want to move away from that altogether?
Not a solution at all. Let me ask you a question. If you're a turtle in the middle of the ocean choking to death on a compostable plastic straw, do you care if that straw is compostable? You're going to compost because you're going to die. If you're on the waterfront at the beach and you're just trying to enjoy the beach with your family and you see a bunch of compostable plastic straw litter on the sand, are you going to say, oh, well, that litter is going to compost? Is that going to make the beach any cleaner for you? Composting works if you put these materials through the composting process, which usually involves moving them through 3 different bins. They have to be in a very specific composting infrastructure. So to answer your question, that simply doesn't work. And paper is another environmental resource that we just really don't want to use that much of. I think, metal straws are, I don't think that there's an issue. I certainly don't mind using them. And I really don't use straws. But I'm glad you asked that question, because just in much the same way the word recycling has kind of contributed to greenwashing, we are finding these kind of really cool sounding like plant-based plastic, and it's compostable plastic. Be very cautious about that, because it is still inundating our environment with a material that not only degrades our experience of our natural resources, but it does cause terrible conflict with animals, especially marine animals that interact with them.
And also to that end, Eileen notes that some of the beverage companies are now selling an idea of 100% recyclable bottle. Is that a marketing strategy, or is that something that's actually going to come to fruition?
It's called glass. Glass is 100% recyclable. If they're not talking about glass, don't waste your time reading about whatever it is that they're trying to tell you. Metal is 100% recyclable, but you know, I remember, it seems like it wasn't that long ago that I was young, but I remember a lot of these beverages companies had glass bottles, and it really was no big deal at all. Um, I do look forward to the day that we just, instead of thinking about, oh, let's invent some crazy new science, we could just also go back to what worked, which was glass and metal, because those are the materials that are 100% recyclable.
Great, thank you. There's more questions in the chat, and we can get to those after, but I want to make sure that we give Brian Kramer a chance to talk about the direct action that we're going to take this coming Tuesday. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Kramer.
So Brian L., I got to say, little as you said, depressing, but I look at the action as a bright spot. I mean, I'm fired up, and I hope everybody else is too. And you mentioned the legislation's at an inflection point, so now is a really, really good time to call. So on your screen, I love this picture, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, actually Senator John Ossoff and Senator Raphael Warnock. I love the picture. I love the saying even more that politics is the way to make this change happen. And I think that's just so much of it. So I'm going to take a few minutes, tell you about this action, and explain what we're going to do. And I think you've already laid out why it's important. So politics is the way to get the change. Not many of us, if any, are going to become politicians. So making these calls is the next best thing you can do. And I've heard even a half dozen calls to an office gets attention, and like 10 or more, a politician will say, whoa, there's really something brewing here. So let's make that happen. So to understand why your calls matter to politicians, you have to think like they do. The three things they care about most are re-election, re-election, and re-election. And that may be cynical. Some may care about policy, and some may care about doing good, but they can only do that if they're elected in office. So it really is in large part about getting elected. To that end, they want happy voters. They want people who will vote for them. So the calls matter. When they hear from you, they want to do something that you, their constituents, care about. And that's why we got to let them know what we're thinking here. The second point on this slide, they only care about their constituents. So as infuriating as it might be, and how much control and sway Mitch McConnell has over the Senate in the United States, he really only cares about his Kentucky voters because they're the ones that put him in office and keep him in office. So when we make calls, we're going to call people who you can actually vote for, and that's important. So hopefully you realize the importance of these calls. There's a 5-minute video. I highly recommend. The link is on the screen. Hopefully, Barbara, if you can put the link out there. I've watched it dozens of times. I laugh every time. It's informative. Turns out these people, the cast of 4, are, I think, professional actors. I just saw this guy in blue on an episode of The Blacklist, and other people have recognized this woman. And there's a bunch of cameos from politicians and their staff members that tell you how much this really means. So a couple of things that come out in this video. Almost everybody's a little nervous and a little apprehensive when they make the calls. That's nervous. You don't have to be an expert. You're just giving your opinion, really. We're going to give you a script to make it easier. And when it comes down to it, these politicians, they tally the calls. So it doesn't have to be perfect. So as Brett said, we're going to call our US senators. You can see the map over here. the gerrymandered map. There's 63 senators in the state, so each one of us, we're going to be calling different people, likely. Why? Because you only call your elected politician if you're a constituent. So some of us might be calling Robert Jackson, Brad Hoylman, Brian Benjamin, maybe even Liz Kruger. You might be saying, well, how do I do that? So we're making it easy for you. There's an excellent website out there put out by Common Cause. We'll send this out. Make sure we have your email. We'll send you this link as well. If you go in and put your address, it'll tell you all of your reps. We're only interested in our New York State Senator right now, but it'll give you your reps and their contact information. Very, very easy. So here's how we're going to do this. Here's the steps. The first step is to look up your senator, given that link that I just posted. We'll give you an email. You can put that in your phone for later use because hopefully we'll be doing this quite a bit. I'm going to show you in a second. There's a Google Sheet, a sign-up sheet that has a script in it, some instructions. Going to mark your calendar. This Tuesday is our day of calls, so we're going to ask you to call at some point during that day. So mark your calendar so you don't forget. Then sometime during that day, you make a call, use a simple script, and then when you're done, just log the results with a couple of words, a sentence saying, did you get through live person? How did it go? And that's it. It's pretty simple. So now I'm going to show you exactly what to expect when you go into the sign-up sheet. So the top here is the instructions really that I just gave you. Here's the script. It's pretty simple. There's a little bit of optional if you want to get fancy. There's some optional verbiage, but the script itself is only 8 sentences, and one of those 8 is thank you. So it's really just 7 sentences, and it just says, who you are, that you're a constituent, that you're calling the senator to ask him to pass the straws by request bill. That gives you the bill number. You can put that out there so they know exactly what you're talking about. Talks about how terrible you think plastics are. And then the call to action is you want them to vote for this bill and do anything they can to get it out of committee and help make it pass. And then down below, you'll put your name at the bottom, give us your senator so we know who's getting called. If you're with an organization, you can drop that in here, and then the results off on the right. So it's really pretty simple. Those are the steps. Look up your senator, go into this sheet, mark your calendar, make the call, log your results. It's happening this Tuesday. So just know, you really can make a difference, especially when we all call. And that's pretty much it. It's taking part this Tuesday. If anyone has any questions, you can reach me at Brian at justice@4thu.org, or you can reach Brett as well at EnviroJustice@4thu. And that is it.
Amazing. Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. So again, please share your email or contact with us, and then we will send out an email following this event where we will share all of this information about how you can make calls on Tuesday. And we're actually going to try to do this again in a few weeks, hopefully, with assembly members as well. And then as the process for the Break Free from Plastic Pollution bill in Congress moves forward, we're going to keep engaging on this issue, and hopefully we'll be able to engage Brian L. again in Oceana and continue our work with them, our partnership with them. And to that end, I did want to note that in the chat, we did post a link to how you can support Oceana and the great work they do. So we do click on that link and consider making a donation or getting involved with them in any way that you can. And Brian L., we have a lot of questions in the chat about different kinds of products. I think that may be alternatives. I think you kind of answered at least your perspective on that question. But we do have some people that are maybe not in New York State. And I'm wondering if you could talk about if a straws by request type bill has been successful in any other states. And if so, if you've been able to measure the impact or the success of such a bill in another state.
Well, I am not a good person to speak about other states because I'm strictly focused on New York, but I will tell you that in general, these policies designed to reduce plastic waste tend to be very successful. In our own state, even though it wasn't straws, the Suffolk County it was 2017, they passed a bill, and it wasn't even a ban, it was a fee on plastic and paper bags. And a year after its implementation, a lot of the organizations that I work with, combined with the Suffolk County legislature, as well as some retail and consumer groups, they wanted to study the impact of this bag fee bill. And again, it wasn't even a ban. You were charged a fee to take a bag. It had to cost you something. And it turned out that businesses were largely untouched by it, and that it was something like 1 billion fewer plastic bags in Suffolk County. We're not talking about the entire state. We're talking about Suffolk County alone were used in just 1 year. And the percentages, I don't have them in front of me, but they were pretty significant drops in the amount of just the volume of litter collected on the beach. So these types of policies indeed work, because ultimately they don't really target the consumer. They really target the product. So for example, when someone buys a 12-ounce water bottle, it's not the plastic bottle that they want, it's the 12 ounces of water they want. And there are many ways to remove both consumers and businesses from the line of fire when it comes to dealing with this. And that is to really focus, again, on the faucet and turning it off. So just in New York State, we have seen measurable and pretty substantial success in these types of policies. But if you were not in New York State, I would encourage you to find out if your member of Congress has co-sponsored the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. I think I saw that somebody was in California, for example. Senator Feinstein is a co-sponsor. We would love for Senator Padilla. I'm afraid I may not be pronouncing his name correctly, but he holds some important committee assignments that would make his championship of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act very favorable for this legislation's chances of success. So I do encourage you to find out if your member of Congress has co-sponsored the federal legislation, if you're not in New York State. And that is, I assure you, as Brian K. mentioned, these people care to hear from their constituents. And for you to get your member of Congress, either in the House or the Senate, to co-sponsor this bill, every little bit helps. And this bill is picking up momentum. We are very hopeful that we can pass it in a couple of years, and it really could make a significant advancement in reducing plastic pollution. So please do check that out.
Brian, thank you so much. I think we've answered pretty much everyone's question at this point. And it's a beautiful day here in New York, and we have sunny skies, so I don't want to hold everybody too long. So unless there's any other questions for Brian, either one of the Brians, I'm going to close things out and just say thank you to Brian and Oceana for partnering with us today on this event. And we hope this is a partnership that can continue as we continue to engage as a congregation and a community around this plastics issue. And thank you to Brian Kramer for all the work that you and Eileen and everybody on the Justice team have done around making these phone calls back during the election, and for budget justice, and now for our plastic initiative. So, and Brian has posted his email in the chat. If you have any further questions about his presentation, you can email him directly. And of course, we've posted the justice email, the environmental justice email. please do send us your contact information. We're going to send out an email shortly, probably this evening, which will outline everything that you need to do on Tuesday so that we can get a critical mass on calls and really make an impact around this bill. So thanks to everyone for participating and for joining us today. We really, really do appreciate it. And thank you to Ember for all the behind the scenes work, and all of our colleagues in the environmental justice team, Liz and Barbara and Jody and Eileen and Liza and Susan, who's new to our team and has really brought a lot to the team as well. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you soon.